Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Kathy Foster with the Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University. We have created this webinar to help you with some best practices, tips, and tricks on preparing your application for the Energizing Rural Communities Prize. Before we dive in, I'd like to introduce my colleagues. Dana Catron and Melissa Tenick. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit more about what they do here, and then we'll get started. Dana?
Thanks, Kathy. Hello, everyone. My name is Dana Catron. I am Deputy Director of Arrowhead Center, and I oversee a lot of our innovation and technology-based programs. And then I'm also the lead at Arrowhead for grant and contract capture. So happy to be here today.
Thanks, Dana. Melissa?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this amazing webinar. My name is Melissa Tenick, and I am the Program Manager for New Mexico FAST, or the Federal and State Technology Partnership Program.
Thank you. So we'll all three be monitoring chat, so feel free to drop in your questions. Just to let you know, we do have about a half hour set aside at the end of the webinar for a question and answer session. So feel free to drop them in, like I said, as we're presenting. We may be answering your question as we move through the slides, so if we don't get to it right away, just be patient and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and get started because we have quite a bit of content to share. So this is the application workshop for the Energizing Rural Communities Prize. Before we start off, I really want to thank everyone for their work on this prize. It's a very important prize, really taking into consideration how rural and remote communities can become a part of the new energy movement, ways that they can benefit from technologies maybe you all are working with or programming you have that would really elevate the communities that may have been left out historically. So this is a really important prize. I know the prize administrators are very excited as well. So just a brief background into the prize. There are several webinars you can find on the HeroX page that have, really in-depth background information. So if we don't cover it here, you'll be able to find it either on the website at HeroX or in the prize rules, or like I said, in some recorded webinars. We're going to be sharing some best practices with proposal writing. It's a general overview, but you can use it not only for this prize, but other applications as well. There is a team of winning awards here, both federally, state, local, foundation. Dana, Melissa, and I have all written applications before for all of those entities and have been awarded in some form or fashion. Then I'm going to spend some time looking at the criterion and how you can really match up your application to get those high scoring pieces on the rubric, and then we'll touch base on resources. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and start. Just to let you know, if you're not familiar with Arrowhead Center, we are the IP, Commercialization and Tech Transfer Office for New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, New Mexico, but we also serve as the economic development arm for the university and for the state of New Mexico as well, because as a land grant institution, we are tasked with interacting with all of the counties within our state. So not only do we help with all of the elements of small businesses, IP, commercialization within the university, we take that out to the community as well. And we have a number of programs that help elevate small businesses throughout New Mexico. And here you can see our mission. And so this is part of our mission to help elevate the rural communities in New Mexico, but as a power connector, we've been tasked to do that across the country as well. I just wanted to let you know a little bit of how we're involved in clean energy. Thanks to the Department of Energy, we have a major grant where we have formed a clean energy resilience and growth cluster. This is a pipeline program for early innovators and early technology, those small companies that are just starting out. We take you through several modules designed to increase the technology readiness level or commercialization capabilities, to move that small business along, to bring those technologies from idea out into deployment. So if you'd like more information on Surge, you're welcome to contact us. We do like to speak with companies, even if you are outside of New Mexico. If you have technologies that could benefit New Mexico, we'd love to talk to you and see if we could interact in some fashion. So feel free to reach out. Just a background, if you have not really looked through the rules, this prize is designed to help rural and remote communities access clean energy, either through partnerships or financing tracks. And just keep in mind that when you are working with a rural or remote community, that can be a city, a town, a village, a municipality, and even an unincorporated area that is defined with 10,000 fewer residents. So that is the one rule for this prize. You have to be interacting with a rural or remote community as defined by the federal government through the through the BIL. There's 2 phases, some important dates to keep in mind, especially when we're looking at when the submissions are due. That is just around the corner, May 24th, but we're here to help you with that. If you're just now starting, I think this webinar will help you get started well on your way to be able to meet that deadline with your proposal. So that is when the first phase is due, and that's up to $100,000 for either the finance or the partner track. And then from those applications, the DOE will be selecting phase 2 awardees, and that will take place later on this summer. Those submissions will be due in July, and then the announcements will come in August. And just a reminder, it is written here, but you are only allowed to apply for phase 2 if you win a phase 1 award. These slides will be sent to you. This is a step-by-step infographic way to sign up on HeroX to register your team or your idea. So all of this contains hyperlinks, so you will be able to click through. It is a fairly easy way to sign up on HeroX. That's a platform where you will be submitting all the materials you need for this application. So like I said, there details in the rules and other webinars that have posted on HeroX that can walk you through this as well. With this prize, we're really looking to make sure that applicants are really designing programming or financing capabilities to benefit rural or remote communities. This is a way to get maybe some financing or some partnerships that aren't available right now to really catalyze those. When this award was being designed, they found that the 2 largest barriers to getting clean energy out into the rural parts of America is lacking partnerships and lacking financing. So this is really designed to fill that gap. I'm going to say this eligibility is wide open. Unless you are a federally funded entity, you can apply for this. So if you are non-federal government entities, tribal organizations, individuals, nonprofits, even for-profits. So if you are a company, you can apply. You just have to make sure that you're operating in the US. And of course, academic institutions and student groups. Very exciting. All of this can be found detailed in the prize rules packet as well. And I'm going to hand it over to Dana Catron. She is going to really, excuse me, she's going to be talking about, designing how to, use writing to design your application. But I just want to remind you what is required for this prize. You have to have a cover page, a summary slide that tells about your project in 1 slide, a 3-minute video pitch, and then what we're going to be really focusing on here in this webinar is preparing that partnership plan and evidence of commitment, or your project plan and financial statement. These are what we're calling the narrative. It's 5,000 word limit, but this is what you'll be scored on to see about if your prize will be funded or not, with an emphasis on the writing piece of that. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Dana, who has years of experience in preparing various grants and winning them as well. So Dana, I'll let you take over and just let me know when to advance the slides.
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. So kind of before I start, we will be sending out a more comprehensive slide deck after this that includes slides that we don't cover today that are really more, you can consider them like reference slides for technical and grant writing. So they're pretty self-explanatory, and we really wanted to focus a lot more on the things that aren't so self-explanatory in the presentation today. The other thing I wanted to say before I start is we're looking at this from a rhetorical context. And so my background is in rhetoric and professional communication. I've been a professional grant writer for a number of years and have won proposals or awards from many different federal agencies. And so that's what we've used to kind of shape how we teach grant writing and how to shape proposals to really catch the reviewer's eye and make sure they're successful and funded ultimately. So the first thing is really starting at the beginning and thinking about communication, right? Because whatever you submit, whether it's a pitch deck or a technical narrative or even a budget, it is communicating something to that reviewer. And so being very conscious about what you're communicating and how you're communicating it can really make or break a proposal or a submission. So there are three things that we look at when we're trying to shape these kinds of documents. Number one is reviewers are going to construct meaning from what you provide them, whether it's a video, a pitch deck, a technical narrative, like we mentioned. So just keeping that in mind. The reviewers' responses, so how they judge or how they evaluate your proposal is also shaped by the situation, right? And so how you deliver that content is going to shape how they receive it and internalize it. And then they also react moment by moment. And so the example I typically use for this one is when you're reading, a novel or a fiction book or whatever it is, and maybe there's like a funny part, you're not going to wait until the very end of the book to laugh, right? Or to react. The same thing goes for proposals, whether they're very technical or not. That reviewer is going to be reacting moment by moment as they're going through your submission. Next slide, please, Kathy. So what we like to teach again is reader or reviewer centered strategies. So really it's helping them find key information quickly. You can use diagrams, figures, charts, graphs, things like that. Using a really easy to read writing style. So this is not the time to use really flowery marketing type of writing. Most of these submissions have very, very strict requirements in terms of how much space you have. And so I believe for this one, it's 5,000 words, which is not a whole lot to convey, why you are, the best bet for this funding. Highlighting the points that your readers will find to be persuasive. So if there is some nugget or nuggets of information that you think are really kind of the key points you want them to know, highlight them in some way. That you could bold them, italicize them, use some formatting to really draw their attention to those nuggets. And then talk with your readers. And what this basically means is don't be overly technical. When we work with, especially through our SBIR program, we often work with PIs and researchers, faculty who are very, very technical. And that's great, but you can't guarantee that your reviewer is going to be that technical or is going to be an expert in your field. And so try to make your writing, your pitch, again, your video, something that can appeal to many different reviewers, because again, you're not going to know exactly who they are. Next slide, please. Okay, so so a picture or diagram is worth 1,000 words. This is incredibly true also for proposals and submissions. It's really, can you show your vision of the project in a way that captures the attention of that reviewer? That being said, make sure that those visuals you choose to include are the right ones, right? So are they conveying the information you want? Are they conveying the data that you want? So make sure those two things are in alignment. Also make sure it looks professional. So we probably would not recommend trying to draw out a figure in paint. There are a lot of powerful tools now that you can use, and a lot of them are free. Canva is a really good one to help you make professional diagrams, figures. Use you know, even the Microsoft products have pretty powerful things in terms of making clean figures and diagrams that, again, convey the information. They don't need to be the fanciest diagrams in the world. And then make sure, and this is something we include, it's pretty obvious and most people would do it naturally, but we've worked with enough small businesses and proposals that it's something that is often you forget, right, when you're in the midst of proposal writing and putting together these packages. So if you do include a graphic or a figure, just make sure you caption it. So you can say table 1, XYZ, figure 1, and just, it doesn't have to be anything lengthy or crazy, but tell the reader very concisely what it is. And then Kathy added, so for the partnership and finance traps for this particular prize, you can have up to 5 different images included. I'm sure all of you have seen some of these pictures in some capacity. There's these exist all over. They're called ambiguous figures or images. And the reason why we like to bring these up is because what I see could be completely different from what Kathy or Melissa sees, right? But at the same time, it's the same picture. And the same thing goes for proposals. And so what you think you are conveying to that reviewer could be interpreted completely differently by that reviewer. And so when you're starting to craft your narrative or your video or your pitch deck, try to put yourself into their shoes. Or my best advice is get a third-party reviewer. So somebody who is not intimately involved in creating that narrative pitch deck video, just to see, you know, what do they see, what's being conveyed to them, what message are they getting from what you've put together, because you want to make sure that what that reviewer sees and what that reviewer interprets is what you want them to see and what you want them to interpret. So I always like to use this example. It's the most visual that I've found. And again, just remember that there are two sides. What you see, what the reviewer sees, they can be different. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're putting the package together. Next slide, please. So SMART goals. These are often required across many different federal agencies. If you've applied for federal funding before, a lot of them are starting to require this format in the narrative in some capacity. But basically SMART is just an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable or achievable, sometimes it goes different ways, relevant or realistic, and then time bound. And the really nice thing about this framework is if you can put your goals in and hit every one of those letters, you're going to have a really comprehensive good goal, and it's going to set you up for success. And the agency likes to see it because then they know that you're thinking ahead and you're putting this within the scope that they like to see. So I think in the larger deck that we'll share, we actually put some examples of what these could look like. But again, good practice. It's a tool. It's not always required. I believe for this prize, it is required. So if you have questions on, you know, does your goal fit the framework? We are happy to workshop that with you, help you with that as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so successful writing. Again, in the exploded slide deck that you'll get, we go into each one of these points. But we find that using this framework really, again, it's a tool to set you up for success when you're putting one of these packages together. And this applies to prizes and to giant federal proposals that you may put together in the future. So number one is preparation. Make sure you're prepared. You know what you're going to propose. You know how you are aligned with what that agency or funder is looking for. If you're not, I would strongly reconsider applying or figuring out how you can become in alignment, because if you're not aligned, the likelihood of you getting funded is slim to none. Next is research. So if you need to pull data, if you need statistics, if you need backup information, make sure you have it and make sure it's relevant and current. So, you know, don't use stuff from, you know, the 1990s to back up what you're trying to do now. Try to find stuff that's more current. Organization. So we have a lot of different tools to help you be organized when you're putting this together. So Kathy's put together, I believe, checklists. We use compliance matrices, a lot of different proposal development tools that help you stay on track, make sure you're hitting all of the things that the agency wants to see in that proposal package. And then you know that, you know, I've addressed everything that they need. Writing is actually towards the end, because if you have all of your stuff in place, you know what the direction you're heading, you've got your research down, the writing usually comes easy. And so that's just tying all of those different pieces together. And then the last part, which again, we see this a lot because we work with clients all across New Mexico and then even more broadly across the United States. A lot of people don't budget in time for revision and review. And I cannot emphasize and stress enough how important that piece is for creating strong packages. Because again, when you are so close to something, to a proposal, and I mean, I've been doing this for years and years, and I miss stuff all the time. So that revision piece is really critical. And again, it can make or break a proposal, because you may be one word, you know, onto the next page and you don't realize it, or you may have, you know, missed on accident one of the major pieces that they're looking for. And so that third party review and revision can really just act as a, you know, to support a strong submission and make sure you've checked all the boxes. Next slide. Oh, we did include these. So Kathy, actually, if you want to just skim through these, we don't need to go through each, but we'll have those in the slides that we send out. Okay, another thing I really like to talk about when it comes to grant writing is concise writing. And the reason being, it's easier to read. So again, going back to the reviewer, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to kind of absorb what we want them to absorb. But on the other hand, agencies are moving more and more towards shorter narratives is what I've seen. But when I started, we'd be writing 20, 30, 40 page technical narratives. Now, if I see anything above 20 pages, that's kind of crazy. A lot of them have moved to like 10 to 15, if not less. And so concise writing is really critical, because you want to be able to fit as much information right in that narrative as possible, and you don't have very much room to do that. And so these are just some examples. So like instead of a large number of, you could just say many. Prior to that time, you could say previously. And again, especially with proposals like this one, where they're counting the words, right? You have 5,000 words. One word compared to 4 words, that can add up really, really quickly if you're doing that consistently throughout the entire narrative. So really try to think about, am I being concise? Can I make this a little more concise so I have a little bit more room to talk about other things? Next slide, please. Okay, so some other principles of proposal writing or technical writing. The use of positive statements. And so this is not going to make or break your proposal. It could. Most reviewers are not going to be thinking, oh, this is a negative statement, or oh, this is a positive statement, right? But again, you want it to be as easy as possible for them to come to the same conclusion as you about, you know, ultimately getting that funding. And so the example we use it's the same meaning, right? It's talking about closing the valve or having the valve open. But the negative statement is do not close the valve, right? The positive statement, which has the exact same meaning, is leave the valve open. And so again, these are just tips and tricks that you can kind of use to create stronger, more persuasive proposals. The other thing is avoiding longer sentences. This goes back to writing concisely. Here's more of the context behind it though. So when you have longer sentences, it takes longer for that reviewer to process and interpret those sentences. And so while they may be really elegant and constructed beautifully, it may be a beautiful sentence. It's going to take longer for that reviewer to interpret it. So the goal here is not to have the best writing, it's to have the writing that will resonate with the reviewer the most. And I guess more context behind that, if you're not familiar with review processes for these prizes and any federal award, foundation award, most reviewers are not paid to review. And so this is an additional task they have on top of all of the other work they have to do. And most of them have 10s, 20, 30, proposals to go through. It's not going to be, a stack of 5 proposals. It's going to be a substantial amount that they have to go through. And so again, going back to the easier you can make it for them to identify and find key information and to get through the reading, it's going to look favorable for your project. So things you can do, you can break them into multiple sentences. You can use bullet points. There are ways to cut down on the sentence length. Sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
No, Dana, that was great. And thank you so much. We really just wanted to provide an overview. And like Dana said, it's really focusing on that rhetoric, the style of rhetoric, what can cause you to produce a persuasive documentation, especially with something that, you only have 5,000 words to describe. I think that's why they added the element of the video pitch, and that will just strengthen your application as well. And now I'm just going to go ahead and, we're going to transition over into a little bit of the review process, which includes some of the criterion and what we think is important to highlight. And like I said, if there's any questions for Dana, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We are going to switch gears a little here. So thank you again, Dana. That was great information. Mm-hmm. So in our expanded deck that we're sending, because we only have a certain amount of time, I will be sending you ways to edit and review as well, because, that third-party reviewer that Dana talked about, that is so important. And, I know it seems a little intimidating. Who could be my third-party reviewer? A coworker, a friend, a family, a teammate who is a little familiar with the project. I've been on proposals before where we've asked staff who, kind of knows what's going on, but maybe not, as involved as the writers, and they are, have a wealth of information, because they'll pick out pieces and say, I don't know what you're trying to say here, because you are working on it and the iteration is coming in. You just are speaking the same language with other writers by the time it's all over. So I can't stress that enough. And before we go into how this particular prize is going to be scored, I just want you to be aware of some common areas in all evaluation. Like Dana said, you're going to have reviewers, and this is kind of, this is always, even if it's not, on their checklist, on their spreadsheet, this is always in the back of a reviewer's mind. This is why they've been chosen to, go ahead and review these applications. I know the prize administrators, they have recruited a very large number of reviewers from all areas that deal with energy. You're going to have government officials, you're going to have industry experts, you're going to have academics, it's going to be across the board. So this is something to keep in mind as you're writing too. I'm not going to read down the list because you'll have it when we send it. But I will tell you, and I just kind of teased it, that the ERC, that's the acronym we use for this prize, the Energizing Rural Communities Prize, they are going to have 3 to 5 multidisciplinary reviewers review each application. So those subject matter experts can come from across the board. The best way to ensure that you are including everything that's required, keep that rules document on your screen at all times, or if you need to print it out, keep it next to you while you're writing, because you're going to be surprised how often you refer to that rules prize, because there's so much going on in this application, because the prize administrators are very cognizant of how they want you to reach those rural communities. So that's specifically for this award. Okay, so we're going to kind of take each track separately here, even though there is a lot of crossover in content, but we're going to focus first on the partner track submission. And so if you're submitting an application under the partner track, you are going to be required to turn in a cover page. That format is laid out in the prize rules package. The summary slide, we aren't necessarily covering it here, but in a checklist that you will be receiving as part of this workshop, you'll see the rubric and the scoring process for that, and you'll be able to mark off, tick off the boxes and judge yourself if you are meeting that requirement. The 3-minute video pitch has directions as well. And I think it's important to point out here, this does not need to be a produced video. There are ways you can record yourself pitching your project that are very professional. I know you can do it through PowerPoint, you can do it through Zoom or other means necessary. So don't let this intimidate you. This is the opportunity for you to tell the reviewers why this is such a great project to fund. You'll have the written piece, and this will add another layer to really impress upon the reviewers that this will make a difference in remote or rural communities. You are going to be laying out the partnership plan. Now we're getting into this 5,000 word narrative, and this is where you really get to produce the meat of the project and show the reviewers how this partnership is going to create something great. And included in this piece is an evidence of commitment. So you just can't say we plan to. You're going to have to show some commitment between who you're partnering with to show that this will become something that can really impact the community you're working with and be replicable as well. There's been some great webinars that really dive into these partner tracks, and you can find that here when you receive the slide deck. These are hyperlinked to the presentations. So if you need a little more background on that, you can find it on the HeroX platform or through these links as well. Disclaimer, this is a very technical, text-heavy part of the presentation coming up. So this was designed for you to have as reference. I'm going to touch on a few bullet points and talk about those. This might be a good time to, look at this and see if you have questions, to either drop them in chat or save it for question and answer. But I just wanted to make sure once you're writing, once you're creating, you have this to refer to, because it looks at the suggested content, and this is all in the prize rules as well, but then how the statements will be scored. And this is something that is a big part of the review. Like Dana said, it's so important because reviewers, they have these checklists that they will be looking against. So it will really put you in a position of strength if you can really meet the criterion with that scored statement. So 1 meaning highly disagreed, all the way to 6, which is highly agreed. So that's the rubric there. So across both prizes, it's going to be if your project has this mission alignment. So the goals are spelled out in the rules, and we presented those at the beginning of the webinar as well. And I want to just highlight one piece here before we move on. We know you all are working to partner with rural communities or create new partnerships, or have something that can advance projects to benefit the communities that you've identified. But if you don't necessarily have that partnership yet, you have a chance with the evidence of commitment that you will be working on the partnership. But the thing to show here is that you have previous experience. You know how to, collaborate, maybe produce a type of coalition or work with others to produce results. That's going to be an important piece here, no matter what you are proposing. And then in all types of applications, you're going to really have to show how you will measure success. That is something you'll see throughout the criterion slides as well. To meet this criterion, so like I said, you want to highlight that relevant experience, emphasize the alignment with prize goals. This is where you might even, you know, outline a little elevator pitch is what we call it, or use language that you see in the prize rules and add it back here. So it is easier for the reviewers to understand the alignment is there. So, you know, once they recognize a word in your document that's been presented in the rules, that's where the same understanding come through. So that's a really neat tidbit as well. Going through criterion 2, this is how you will be, you know, proposing that partnership phase. So this is how you are going to spell out those activities, whether you are with an established relationship or building upon one or creating a new one. This is where you are going to, you know, show that you have strategies to do this. This is where it's going to get very descriptive. And this is where you're going to utilize those SMART goals. If you see this bullet here, detailed description of activity, milestones, and goals, use that SMART goal framework to create this. And then since there are so, you know, there's a word limit, I highly suggest a graphic that is a timeline or a Gantt chart to show how you will be implementing the project. And just criterion 3, that's your ability to measure and demonstrate impact. So that's when you're really going to show what we call the metrics. And the metrics is the hard data that shows that the project is a success. And there's ways that's in the prize rules. I want to just tell you, these are condensed bullet points just to have as a checklist. But we have more detailed instructions in the prize rule packet and with the document I will be sending along with this presentation that will be a checklist for you to use as well. Metrics is tricky, and I'm speaking from experience because it is the best way to show success, but it takes a little thought. So here's just some tips we've you know, utilized throughout our experience as a grant writing group. And so if you get stuck on here, you might go ahead and, you know, look at our tips and tricks through all these criterion. But I think, you know, making sure it's outlined easy to understand and the emphasis and strategies. And if you can, you know, talk about how the data will drive the decision making and how you're going to measure success with this project. This is a very important piece across any type of, you know, proposal writing. It is highlighting your team expertise and resources. I know we don't have a lot of room for this, so these really need to be high impactful statements. So here you see the suggested content and the scored statements, but some of the tips and best practices for this is highlighting that team members' relevant skills. And a title may show that, you know, it would be better to show than tell in a case like this, or years of experience. Any type of certification or designation can take up some, leave you some room for additional words in other areas. If you can give an example of a past project, a high impact project in fewer words, I think that will be something that would be very strong. And then a, you know, brief explanation of how the team as a whole will be working together to make this a success. And the 5th criterion for this you know, written narrative of the prize is the strategy for future funding after the completion of the prize. So this is what we call in the biz follow-on funding or follow-on activity, because $100,000 is a lot of money, but it goes quickly. So you are going to be telling the reviewers in your application, we are not going to be able to do this without the $100,000, but to keep it going, this is how we plan on raising additional funds, accessing additional resources. And if you can really identify those, I think that's a very strong piece to include in your proposal. Or if you have funding or resources from other awards that you can, what we call leverage to make this a success, that's something to definitely highlight here as well. And once again, some of the best practices for that, if you can create a sustainability plan, even if it's in a type of graphic that really hits home, drives to the point, that will be strong. And how you will be not only working with the funding you get now, but maybe some other activities that can happen because of this funding. This is where it's very important to explain that the funding is setting you up for success later on down the road, setting you up for additional partnerships, setting you up for additional funding opportunities. This is where you'll want to include that information. Okay, I'm going to take a quick breath, but I see that we have several questions in chat, and if we don't get to them right away, just know we do have a half hour for question and answers. But I do want to get into the finance track, and you're going to see a lot of, duplication, because there's only a few things that differ from the finance track submission. And so once again, you're going to have your cover page, the summary slide, the 3-minute video pitch. Now, what's different with the finance track is you are going to be outlining a project plan and a financial statement. So that's what we're going to go over here. Once again, there is a great webinar that just focuses on the finance track. I suggest that if this is a track you're working on, I would take the time to watch that. You have prize administrators, Department of Energy officials talking about this, and it's a very helpful webinar to watch. So just as we had in the criterion for the partnership prize, you'll see a lot of the same content suggestions and scorings rubrics here, but I do want to point out the difference here is, you're going to have to provide information on that financing and financial support experience. So whereas the partnership track, they were, are charged with providing evidence of experience with partnerships. This is where finance track applicants can highlight their experience with any type of financing clean energy projects, helping rural communities access clean energy. This is where you're going to include that. Another great way to show that you have a track record in this is to show what you've learned, lessons learned, either graphic or quick few sentences of prior projects to show relevant experience here. Same tips and tricks basically as the first criterion, but really this, once again, is just going to focus on the financial piece. So that is something that you'll really want to be able to produce as well. This is a proposed partnership phase is in here as well, because you do have to be partnering with the small communities, the rural communities and remote areas. So this is, again, once you'll have your SMART goals kind of taking place, this is where you'll put in your Gantt chart. This is where you will provide details. So this is a piece that really, shows how you're going to do everything. And a little more, this is basically what we saw before, but here, the differentiation is those financing barriers. If you have identified those, this is where you really want to spell those out in your solution. And this one point, this is very important for both tracks, knowing that there's $100,000 involved, you need to be presenting a realistic and achievable timeline. The period of performance for this is only a number of months. So that is what you're going to do with the $100,000. So for both tracks, when you're creating your budget, you need to make sure that you are producing achievable activity and milestones with the budget provided. Once again, we're looking at, the outcomes, the impacts, and how you're going to measure metrics. So once again, SMART goals has been mentioned in this criterion as well, because you will be really having to show that the work you will do will create a positive impact for the community. There is a piece here that I want to call out as well. Some of these scoring statements we've seen 1 through 6. In this criterion 3 for both the partnership and the finance tracks, the reviewers are going to be looking at a rubric that, asks if this, the plan or the project you're describing in your application has a high likelihood for success, that's what we call a go or no go, a yes or no. So it's either going to be labeled 1 as highly disagree or 6 as highly agreed. So there's no in between. This is kind of the yes or no. Just want to let you know that that is a piece to pay attention to, because all the other scoring statements have that, range of 1 to 6. Once again, this probably mirrors the criterion for the partnering track, but you just want to make sure that you have these credible methods and describe the outcomes you're expecting and how you will get there. The budget, staff, and organizational structure. So of course this makes sense. This is the finance track. So a big piece is going to be budget. So you're going to have a very clear budget for this proposed activity. But this is where you also get to say, these are the resources we can pull in. These are the team members we can pull in based on the budget, based on maybe some in-kind support. And as you'll see, the scoring statements align with that suggested content as well. A detailed and realistic budget, like I said, this is $100,000. Make sure the activity you're proposing matches that budget and time you have to do it. This is where, as a partnering track, you're describing your team. This is where you're going to really be able to describe who you're pulling in for this finance track as well, and other resources, knowing that this just can't be done with, let's say, a credit union alone or a financial institution or a co-op alone, that you will need a partnership element to, or some strategies for other resources. And criterion and finance track is also the sustainability issue. How are you going to keep this going no matter what? So this is your chance to say, this $100,000 will be an excellent foundation to set us up for future success and future pathways to keep this project going. So that is something that you really have to consider when you're preparing your package, is sustainability. And right here, you'll find a few more tips and best practices. And I see the chat is going up pretty high. So we're going to pause here for, I think, Melissa, it's okay. If there's any questions that haven't been answered, I know we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything I can address right now, or that we can answer right now?
We've been working through it, but just another clarification for everybody on what the partner track looks like and who would be eligible partners for that partner track.
Sure. So the partner track, the eligibility requirements there, this is where you would be partnering. I'll give you a few examples that I've heard. And this is where you're going to want to watch that partnering track, that webinar, or even go through the slides that's hyperlinked. That is something that really spells it out. It spells it out to the detail that you're probably looking for. But what we're doing in some of our connecting is that we're seeing some of the smaller communities want to partner with maybe someone who can do an environmental study for a project for them. Maybe you're forming a new coalition. That's a great way to have a partnership. If you're growing an existing partnership, that would be something that would be fundable as well. So these are also, the examples are listed in the rule book, and those are just some examples. And the thing about the partnering, they provide examples, but it is by no means an exhaustive list. One other resource I'd like to point out, if you have an idea about a partnership, but you're not quite sure, there are several power connectors involved in this prize. Several of us have office hours where you can meet one-to-one to see if your project or idea is something that would work. I encourage you to use those. You can find that information on the HeroX page. We have opened up office hours as well. That information will be on the last slide, where you can have my contact information and a scheduling tool to schedule some of those office hours. So first thing is, I'd look at that webinar, or at least a slide deck for the partnership prize. Second, go ahead and read through the rules. Third, if you're still confused and you'd still like some feedback, go ahead and interact with some of the power connectors hosting those one-on-one office hours.
Awesome. And then really quickly, Kenneth is asking, what does a financial statement look like?
That is in the I'm sorry, I should have included that. But the reason why we didn't really include a lot of this background on the partnership and finance, because there have been several webinars that are available to you. The finance track webinar goes into great depth of what is required in that finance piece. Even if you don't have time to really watch the webinar, I'm just sorry if I'm making everybody kind of motion sick here. This link here, and I'm afraid to click it because every time I click on something, it doesn't pop up. But they have the slides here too that produce the exactly what you need. And I would go ahead and look at the prize rules as well.
Awesome. And then one quick question from Brad, who has his hand up, and then we will keep going. And then there's going to be more time at the end for more Q&A.
I put the question in chat, or can I just talk to you?
Yeah, that'd be great, Brad. Hi.
Hi, thank you very much for the webinar. As far as the SMART goals go, is that part of the 5,000 word limit?
Yes, and so you know, when you create a SMART goal, and Dana may be a little jump in, Dana, but you know, you're not going to be, you know, spelling it out necessarily as an acronym, but you're going to be incorporating all of those elements to make a statement or two that encompasses those. So the SMART goal is really a way to create a goal that is attractive to the reviewers and shows that you have a goal that will turn into success. Dana, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so the funny thing, we we submitted a proposal using SMART goals and did spell out the acronym SMART, and it was funded. I think, and the way I would maybe, if you have more than, you know, one goal, maybe table it, but again, really consider the visual element, right? If you can spell out SMART, and it's really easy for them to figure out, okay, these are, you know, how each one is addressed, it makes it that much easier for the reviewer. So so to answer your question, we've done it in the past and have been awarded. We've also done a more you know, actual sentence that just touched on each piece. Both of them work. I would say definitely do it at first when you're first putting your goals together. Definitely outline it in using the acronym, and then you can piece it together into a coherent sentence. But it's not going to, I wouldn't say, especially for these prizes, you can probably, I would say you can probably use the acronym to help. And I mean, as a reviewer, if I were reviewing and I saw that, I would be pretty happy, because then I wouldn't have to think as hardly or as hard on, did they touch on each one of these things, right? Because it'd be spelled out for me right there. So
Perfect. I love that. Thank you, Dana. That's great advice. This has been up for a bit, and this is a lot of common sense, but we want to make sure that if you know, this is top of mind, that you know, something that could tank the proposal is, you know, not planning enough, starting late. You know, we all procrastinate. That is, you know, a fact of life. But you know, this is something that, you know, we have a few weeks. I know a lot of folks on here, they have written, you know, they've answered calls for funding within days, because sometimes you don't find out about it until a few days before it's due. So we know you all have that experience, but if you know about it now, you have plenty of time to go ahead and start the planning on that, because we're still about 2 weeks away. And this is, you know, not a huge grant, it is a prize package. We just want to make sure you are really being able to have some of those tips and tricks to submit the best proposal you can. I can't stress this enough. Every question you probably have is in the directions in those prize rules. It's going to take, you know, several read-throughs of those. I go through and I highlight, and then I make notes on the side. When I have a question, there's little tricks, you know, to make your PDF searchable. Look for that, you know, just keep that close to you at all times. That is where you are going to find answers to your questions and the way to write this. You want to make sure you are completing the submission as it is required. And some of these bullet points, we pointed out in the scoring criterion that they're going to be looking at this. So you want to make sure you have that measurement of success. That project detail is going to be catamount in what you're going to be producing here. And I think through a very well put together proposal, this is going to show that you understand the prize goals. Once again, a great way to show understanding is repeat back some of the words you find in the solicitation. Okay, so we have one more tool to go through. Dana, would you like to kind of just, this is a very specific process in formal grant writing, but we kind of condensed it here and tried to simplify it to make it something that everyone could use in this prize. And Dana, would you want to help me out a little here on the logic model?
Yeah, I have to unmute myself. Yeah, so again, this is not required by the prize. You don't have to do this. We highly recommend it though. It's a good tool. If this is your first time submitting any kind of proposal, or maybe it's, you're a seasoned proposal writer, you wouldn't need to use it. But again, it's a tool, and we find it really useful again in making sure that everything we need to convey to that reviewer is included, and we're communicating that effectively. So there are also a lot of different ways to use logic models. There's a lot of different instructions on how to use logic models, and there's a lot of different actual models that different people use. So again, you have to kind of figure out as you're writing these grants and doing more of these, what works for you, and then do that. For a lot of people, storyboarding, we didn't talk about storyboarding, but storyboarding is another tool you can use to help kind of outline what you're trying to convey. But anyway, for logic models, it's just a way to identify and address any missing elements in that project. So it's going to help you outline what are your goals, what are your objectives, your inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And if you ever submit a proposal to the EDA, you will have to talk about these in depth. They really are hyper-focused on outputs and outcomes. And so getting into the practice of kind of figuring out what those are for your specific projects is, again, it's a tool, and it can lead to better outcomes for you if your project gets funded. So benefits, again, it can enhance the clarity. Again, and it's just an exercise for you. It also helps facilitate communication with stakeholders. So a lot of the time what we do is we'll put our logic model together, and if we're looking for partners to join our project or join our proposal, the logic model is a really nice tool to show them, to really succinctly capture what it is we're trying to accomplish with that project without handing them, a ton of text to read through. So again, it's a visual element. And then it also streamlines the evaluation and reporting. So Kathy, do we have an example? I can't remember. Okay, yeah, so in grant writing, or just in general, it's not specific to grant writing, but for the different components. So, and again, this can differ depending on who you're talking to, who's teaching it, how they do it. This is how we do it at Arrowhead, and it works really well for us. So for resources and inputs, this is generally your materials, supplies, staff, space, funding. Like, what do you need to do the project? So, FTE, you need staff time. If you're doing testing, maybe you need access to a laboratory. If you're in the field, so it is materials, but it's also the staff time, things like that. Activities. So these are, what are you going to do during your project? So what are the specific tasks and work that is being conducted during that project? So you may have a lot, you may have a few, depending on the scope of your project. Kathy mentioned this before, and I can't emphasize it enough. Again, make sure your scope and your budget are aligned, because reviewers will hone in on that, and they'll be looking at scope versus budget to make sure those two are aligned and it makes sense. If you're over scoped, that's never a good thing. We call that scope creep. you don't want to put yourself in a position where you owe an agency work and you have run out of money. So be very conscientious of that. Outputs and outcomes can be a little bit confusing. They're pretty similar. Outputs are the specific deliverables or products that have resulted from the activities, whereas outcomes are the changes expected from the activities. So if anyone has questions on the difference between those two, I'm happy to go into that in more detail. And then impacts are those larger long-term changes and effects. Like in the long run, what is your project going to do? For anything ERC related, it's what is your project going to contribute or do for that community, right? So what are the long-term effects that this project may have? And then we just put together a couple of examples. So you can see we even break it up into two kind of buckets. So the planned work and then the intended results. That's not as important to really think about, but it does, you know, at a higher level, it helps to think about it. And again, preface this by saying this may work really well for some of you. It may be completely confusing and backwards to some of you as well, and that's okay. It's if it resonates with you and it could be useful, definitely use it. We can provide templates. If not, then don't. There are a lot of different tools out there to help you frame your project in a way that makes sense for you. So, and we'll provide these slides so you can go over these examples later. And I think that was it on logic models.
Yeah, and like Dana said, if it resonates with you, I think it's a great tool. It took me a while to kind of, and I still have still a little iffy with it, but I tried to, you know, provide some context with the finance track and partner track criterion with that last slide. Okay, this was a lot of information, and I kind of been, you know, peeked in the chat here and there. I've seen questions on the background. You know, this wasn't as much an informational webinar because we've done a few of those. This is really to get you set up for a successful application. This is a, you know, type of a workshop where we can give you ideas, tips, and tricks. But I would like to open up the floor for questions and answers. My email is right here. And like I said, we have opened up office hours. And this link will be live. I can drop it in the chat if I can, you know, do that with the way I only have one screen, and so I'm having a little technical hurdle myself. But so we are here to answer questions right now, and then if we don't get to it or you need some more, this is where we're going to really be answering like generalized questions. But if you have really deep specific ones, I encourage you to sign up with office hours with any of the power connectors, because that's when we can give you the time and attention you deserve to talk about your project. So with that, Melissa, if we have any questions that haven't been answered, we can do it.
Yes, there's been lots of discussion in the chat on the partnership direction. And I know that we've done webinars on this before, and, you know, they can go and access those to see that information. But, you know, just as they're getting ready to write their proposals or their ideas down, would you, kind of all different questions. So would you recommend bringing in multiple partners for one partnership track? And then when we are targeting a community with one application, how many communities can be targeted with one application?
So I'll answer that question first with how many communities can be targeted. The suggestion is to work with one community because of the scope that it would take to do that work and the prize amount. And this is, I know it's hard because you've probably identified several communities that could use this, but what we are finding out and some of the thought behind it is that with the project for that one community, part of this application is also going to be showing how you are going to make it replicable across the country or across a region. If you try to involve too many communities, you are going to run out of resources. This is really, it's a, you know, it's a specific, if I can talk, way to benefit a community. And I know that's, it's hard, right? It's going against, you know, what we're used to is like a larger scope, but this is very directed because if this can be proven in one community, then the next step would be to see how it can be replicated. This is also going to set you up for additional funding. I got to tell you this, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, they have $1 billion of funding coming down through the pipeline at some point. So this is really where you are going to set up. This is a catalyst. So I would discourage multiple communities on this particular prize. But if you have specifics that you'd like to go into, I encourage you to go to HeroX and use some of these office hours to really talk through that with some of the power connectors. And that first
Awesome.
question, I already forgot.
Not so with the first question, if they are going, you know, the partner track, they have identified that one community where, you know, they know they're going to make a really big difference in that community. How many partners do you recommend that they partner with on that partner track to bring into for any work they're going to be doing in that rural community?
Once again, it's all about budget and scope. I wish I had a clear-cut answer because it's very easy to think big on this, but you'll have to keep in mind that some of your partners may want to provide in-kind, you know, time or resources. But if you are partnering with something that will have a cost attached to it, you really have to pay attention to that, because this 100,000 is a lot of money, but it will go very quickly. So that's the best answer I can give without fully knowing about the project and kind of advising you on the budgeting piece. But like I said, if you'd like to really talk through your project more, we can help you out, or the other power connectors as well. And this is hard because I know everyone has like great grand ideas, and I know they're fantastic ideas, but they're tied to a budget too. So that's what makes it a little, you know, hard to kind of narrow that down.
Exactly. And then I think this might be a question that they should direct to HeroX, but Joe asks, rules say partners should register on HeroX website. Please clarify where. How is that different than where we identify teammates in the application?
Okay, so if you have, and I've registered in the HeroX platform for other prizes that aren't related to this one, as well as an Arrowhead teammate. So what you'll do is and I'm not going to go back into the very beginning of the slide deck because it'll make everybody nauseous, but there's step-by-step instructions. So if you have not registered on HeroX, that's the first thing you have to do. And then you identify the teammates, and then those teammates will be included in your actual application as well.
And then can I add to that?
Yes.
Because I usually submit for these prizes.
Perfect. Yay.
So there's on the more public facing HeroX, you'll add your teammates, and so people will be able to see who's tied to your team. But to actually submit your package, you as the team lead will need to register, and there's usually on the prize site, you can go there, it'll have a button for you to register, and that's where it'll take you to a non-public interface where you'll submit or you'll upload all of your application materials. And again, you'll have to have your username, password to get into that, and that's where you'll actually submit the package.
Awesome.
Perfect.
And then we have a hand raised by Sean.
Hey guys, good
Hey,
to see some of you again. Yeah, hey, I wanted to see if you guys could clarify like the Empower Innovation Network, signing up there, finding a partner there. How would you envision using that? Do we need to use it if we already have a pretty good consortium of partners locally that look like we can establish what we're doing? Like, can you give me some insight into what I need to do going into that, and maybe just like the basis of like, why is it there?
Yeah, so what Sean is talking about there, another power connector, they actually have a platform, and I didn't include it here, but it is on the HeroX page. This is a platform that will take you to a specific area where different leader, different application leaders are signing up, and they have, it's like a matchmaking platform almost, where they will try to see who's looking for what. If you're missing a team member, you're missing a piece, and you want to see where you can find one, this is a great resource. That is in a different webinar, but all the power connectors are located on the HeroX. I don't know if you can find that, Melissa, if you can find the EFN hyperlink, that might work. But if not, we can include that. But you do not have to use them. It's a great resource, and I encourage you to sign up for their platform. It's a great resource as you go down this journey of working in the energy projects, because that's their specialty and capability. But you do not have to access them. But I would encourage you to sign up. Yes, so I see in the chat we are going to be emailing the slide deck, and it's even going to be a little more expanded than what we had here. We just didn't have a lot of time to go into detail, but you'll have an expanded slide deck here. I'm just kind of going through the questions. Is there another question I should answer, Melissa? There's been great interaction on chat. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I think we're all caught up on chat. There are some specific questions. So if I'm not calling your questions out to the whole group, that means your question is very specific, and that is a really good opportunity for you to schedule a one-on-one with either Kathy or any other power connector. But here, really, we want to address questions that can be that pertain to the larger group. But also know that the conversation doesn't end here. After this, Kathy's email is right on the screen. If you have very specific questions that are specific to your technology, specific to your direction, please reach out, and then you can have a one-on-one meeting to get everything answered. I see Sean's hand up again.
Hi guys. So hey, yeah, question about the navigating the application. I haven't looked at it yet. We're getting ready to start opening it up and getting our login and all that business with our team. And is it the typical, here's the box where you upload your content, here's the box where you upload your content for this question, it's all divided out, or is it like a 5,000 word PDF that needs to be like all stacked on top of each other?
Yeah, Dana, since Dana has, submitted on this platform before, I'll let her kind of give you the quick rundown.
Yeah, so yes, to both. So they provide a template on the prize site for each track. It's a Word doc. So my recommendation is don't deviate from the template they provide. Fill that in. It's going to be a Word doc. I can't remember exactly if they require you to PDF. I think you do have to PDF it, but then in the actual submission platform, it'll say upload your narrative here. And you just upload it. And then usually for like the video, you put the YouTube link. So it's once you get in, I would actually though encourage you, if you're going to apply, or if you are even thinking about applying, get into it now so you can see what all the different fields are that you'll need to fill out, and then verify all of the different attachments that you'll need to attach.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering, we filled out an application recently, and it had 15 different fields to populate, and I was just wondering if it was a single or 5, whatever the 5 different categories you guys have: cover page and video and plan.
Yeah.
If it's all just one giant 5,000.
No, so they'll have a spot for the cover page to upload, and then a spot for, and it's not one of those where you have to like copy and paste paragraphs of text into a field box. The field boxes are going to be for like name, address, email, that kind of information.
Have you found that portal to be fairly user friendly? And we've found some other non-user friendly portals, user friendly.
Yeah, no, I would say that compared to other portals, especially on the federal side, knock on wood, it's never crashed on me when submitting. I would still encourage you to submit you know, at least a day before the deadline, but it's a really, they did a really good job on the portal. So it's really self-explanatory. You can go in before and explore, figure out, you know, everything you need to fill out, all the attachments and the format they want for the attachments. And then they let you save all of your work and things like that. So it's pretty
Okay,
user friendly.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of our power connectors, and it's on the HeroX page, they actually did a step-by-step application process. So I would encourage you to look at that, and that was through EFN too. So if you had, I'm sure you could reach out to them, but they had a pretty comprehensive how-to video. So that might be another resource for you as well. I'm dropping some things in chat for everyone, just so you could grab them while we're on, but happy to take some more questions.
I had a question. It's just a repeat from the chat. In the application template, there's a place where we put in a lot of like proposed phase 2 activities, but there doesn't seem to be a spot for what we're going to do for the phase 1 activity. Could you just clarify that a little?
Yeah, so I think when you are looking at, and so are you looking at finance or partner or both?
I was looking at the partner track,
Yeah.
but the other person might be looking at finance.
So in both of them, there is a spot for you to talk about the detailed project. And that is that criterion 2, I believe, on both tracks, where you talk about the details of what you'll be doing with the money that is going to be awarded in the first phase. But you do, so the thing, this one's kind of hard because you're not quite sure how, you know, what the impact and the outcome is going to be. So it's your best guess and your best, what you think, you know, it's predicting why you're starting with this $100,000, how that's going to carry over, and what you would do with the second phase of the prize. So it is required. And like I said, this is a 5,000 word document. That template, and we'll include the templates in the follow-up email. Follow the templates. And I don't have it in front of me right now, but the templates really show you how to build that narrative.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Jason.
Yeah, Jason Walker, Minnesota. I'm wondering, how granular do you need to get with this budget? I know it's prize money, so it's not as detailed sometimes as other grants. Are we talking I could have a line item that's set up workshop $5,000, or do I need to go food this much and mileage this much, and just kind of how much detail are we looking at when we're setting up that budget?
And I'm going to let Dana answer, but because this is a very different funding mechanism than a grant. So Dana, do you know, putting together these budgets, from what I understand, it's not as detailed as maybe a grant budget, but what's been your experience here?
Yeah, so it's not going to be like your traditional SF 424 that you would submit for a federal grant. They're going to want to know generally what are you going to use the money for. So if you anticipate travel, or, you know, so I would definitely include the different budget categories that you anticipate using. But you don't need to go into the level of detail like calculating your mileage and per diem and hotel and all of that. And I believe, don't quote me on this, Kathy, we need to double check, but I am almost positive this is unrestricted funding. It comes in as a cash prize. And this is why this funding is so advantageous. We love going after these prizes for other things, because when the money comes in, if you have a significant change in your scope or something like that, you can change that, no problem. So for those of you who've worked on other federal grants and contracts, it's a lot less flexible. You have to oftentimes go to the agency and get permission to change budget categories if it's over a certain percentage and things like that. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you use the funds, when you use the funds, and if you change your, your initial projected use of the funds. So.
Thank you. That helps. I'm used to the very granular one, so I was
Yeah,
just checking to make sure
it's
that
hard
that's
to
what-
break yourself of that. But yeah, definitely include the buckets, but you don't have to go into the detail.
And they'll let you know if they need clarification. So, I don't think, like Dana said, it's that granular detail, but if there's something that's left out, they may come back and say, could you provide a little more information? I'm dropping the links to the partner track template in the chat, and then I'll drop the finance one.
Did the template question get answered? Following the, I don't think it did. Anne, for your question about the template, delete the instructions for each section, but leave the section headers. So I'm trying to remember what it looks like, but usually there's, the section header, and then they'll have exactly what they want to see in each section. So just, we like to leave the instructions while we're putting our proposals together as a reference point. And if you want to clean it up, my advice, is a little tip, is I often pull out the instructions and put it as a comment in, for the header, and then it doesn't distract from the actual narrative. But that's completely personal preference. So.
And while we're on, real quick, because I think we have just a few more minutes left, I just want to direct you all to where you can have additional resources that might answer your questions. Because even if you don't have time to maybe watch the webinar, the slides are there. Sometimes that's what I do. I find that a lot of information I'm looking for is on the slides. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So this is the HeroX platform, and there's several tabs here that you can look through, including, the frequently asked questions. Here's where you'll see teaming information. This forum is a great place to say, I'm looking for a partner. I need this type of resource, to see if you can interact there. But the webinars and recordings, as you'll see, they have links to every thing that's been posted to this point. We haven't listed our office hours yet. Those are pretty new. We've been trying to meet folks face to face, but now that we're getting down to closer to the deadline, we've incorporated some office hours, so that will be included here pretty soon as well. So the Clean Energy Business Network, they're a great resource. They have been hosting a lot of one-to-one meetings and really guiding people through this process and listening to their ideas and providing feedback. And the Entrepreneur Futures Network, EFN, they're that power. They have an actual platform you can use, but they also have office hours that they're happy to talk with you. And I put a link to our office hours up. It's through the Calendly tool in the chat. And then I think we're putting our email information in there as well. Okay, Sean, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. I'm that kid in the back of the classroom. Anyway, so hey, will there be follow-up calls when they're trying to figure out who to grant the awards to, or will it just be like a scoring matrix? It's a done deal? Like we're working with some other grants, and we have some follow-up calls like, hey, can you clarify this or that? Is that part of this, or is it pretty much just going to be a scored deal and it's over? Because I guess the reason I'm asking is our applicant with the city of Silverton may not be our deepest knowledgeable expert to answer follow-up questions. I'm trying to figure out and make sure we've got the right person on the end of the phone for that kind of stuff.
I think they're very clear on that criterion and the rubric. So Dana, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not see anywhere in the rules any type of follow-up that it's going to be pretty cut and dry scored.
But that's not to say it
application.
can't happen. So
Okay.
if they maybe they're down to, they've selected, you know, their picks and they need to cut, you know, 4 or 5, but they're really close. That might trigger a follow-up. What I would say though is they will never cold call you about the follow-up. So they will send you an email or a message of some sort saying, hey, we're requesting XYZ. We need more clarification on your budget or on your, you know, on this activity. And so we've gone through that several times with several different agencies. It's different for each, and it's different depending on the circumstances. but we've never gotten cold called about a proposal. So they'll always let you know in advance. So you would have time to figure out who is the best person to answer, you know, these specific questions. Yeah.
And in the last 5 minutes, if I can, I want to let you know something else we'll be sending out. And I'm going to share my screen. This is what we have created to help you kind of keep track. It's very detailed, very involved, because we basically took the suggested content and scoring criteria word for word from the rules document and created a checklist. And so that will be accompanying the email, and I'm just trying to figure out how to share my screen real quick. I'm so sorry, bear with me. Okay, and this is a fillable PDF that we'll be sending out. And it's very, like I said, it is pretty comprehensive, but we wanted to make sure you had a tool that you would be able to match what you're putting in the application to what's in your application. So this has the requirements, and then here's a checklist. Was it provided? Yes or no. And then if the compliance, if there's a note you need to remind yourself, like add this later, there's an area for that. And then we went beyond. So this is more of a compliance matrix, but we also added a checklist here. So this is, exactly from the scoring rubric demands in the criterion. And this is where you get to look through these and grade yourself or have a third-party grader. And then once again, a place for you to take notes to add into the proposal later. There's a lot going on here. You might just want to use a compliance piece, or you might just want to use a checkpoint, or you could use all of it. So we have one for the finance track. They're pretty long because, like I said, each piece of the criterion is entered here, but it is a way to help you keep track or double check that you have put everything that is being asked for into the application. So that will be in the attached, as an attachment in the email following up as well. Okay. Unless there's any other questions, I'll stay on for a few more minutes, but I thank you all for being here. And I hope this was useful to you. We are here to answer other questions. If you have specific questions about some of the writing pieces we presented, we do have other templates that might help you out as well. So feel free to contact us. And then we will also, send out this recording and the deck here that even has a little more detail than presented here, and then that checklist as well. And I'm going to throw in the rules just for convenience, because that's just what I do. So unless there's any other questions, I hope you all have a great afternoon and best of luck to everyone. Great.
Thanks a lot. That's awesome.
Thanks, Summer. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll send you an email shortly.
Oh, great. Look forward to it.
Thank you.